the early years of humanity's journey among the stars, the galaxy was a tapestry of countless species and cultures, each with its own customs, prejudices, and myths. When the first Terran explorers ventured beyond the Sol system, their ships were modest in comparison to the behemoths fielded by older civilizations. Earth's technology lagged behind in many ways, and humans possessed few resources that neighboring powers coveted. However, these explorers carried something else, an unwavering ethical call to treat all forms of life with compassion. This principle had been forged through millennia of human history, a history rife with suffering, but also glittering with acts of empathy and kindness. As these ideals spread through the fledgling diplomatic channels, some alien observers dismissed them as naive fluff. Others watched curiously, intrigued by the moral resolve that pulsed from the humans' hearts. Human starships were not the most advanced, but the crews took meticulous care to treat every region of space they encountered as a community, not just a conquest. Late one evening by Terran Standard Time, two young navigators, Sophia Chang and Hami Okor, surveyed a new region often plagued by privateers and cosmic debris. Instead of arming cannons or preparing for threats, they systematically scanned the area for any signs of distress. They hailed every inbound vessel politely and offered assistance. At first, no one responded. It was hardly surprising. In frontier space, distrust was standard. Yet the humans kept sending their messages of goodwill. Over time, signals came drifting in. Battered merchant ships, outcasts fleeing xenophobic regimes, refugee flotillas traveling under the radar. The Terrans offered water, medical supplies, and safe haven without any demands in return. Word spread. Stories drifted into the official channels of the galactic community. Humans, it was said, provided life-saving aid without seeking tribute. For some, it was a cause for suspicion. No one gave anything for free. Whispers began swirling across the old trade routes about hidden motives. Perhaps the humans were planning to expand covertly, or sow political chaos. But days turned into weeks, and the pattern remained consistent. Drug cartridge smugglers, fish-like aliens seeking new spawning grounds, and the plague-stricken from distant cosmic outposts all reported the same phenomenon. The Terrans refused to put a price tag on their help, asked no servitude in return, and saw each being's life as worthy of protection. This unusual approach led to a fateful encounter when a severely damaged ship stumbled into Earth territory, its hull half melted from battles with raiders. Aboard was a single occupant, a Zelari merchant named Avex Lore. He was close to death, the remains of his cargo scattered throughout the hold. He'd fought back fiercely against marauders and nearly lost his life. The Terran reconnaissance vessel Caduceus arrived on scene. Expecting the usual territorial standoff, Avex was ready to rig his vessel's reactor to self-destruct rather than be boarded. But the humans approached with an offer. They wished to help him. Even battered and delirious, Avex recognized sincerity in their voices. Desperate, he accepted. Medics transferred him aboard the Caduceus, repaired his injuries, and even restored his cargo. Days later, Avex walked again, greeted with genuine warmth by the crew. These humans asked no salvage fee, no secret intel, nothing. It shattered Avex's deeply rooted beliefs about others in the galaxy. For Zelari, every transaction was typically negotiated to the last microchip. Odd Avex promised to repay them in whatever ways he could, but the Terrans simply wished him safe travels. Rumors of their mercy and humanitarian spirit grew, reaching not just merchant fleets but also the war-hardened realms. In the swirling blackness between sectors, the Tutari Dominion was an ancient power, infamous for subjugating lesser worlds. Their fleets of colossal spiked starships had pummeled countless systems into submission. Over time, the Dominion had grown complacent, dismissing compassion as a relic of weaker species. Tahari propaganda hammered home the idea that empathy was a resource to be exploited, not embraced. When Tahari scouts first heard tales of these foolishly benevolent humans, they saw an easy mark: Plans were laid out in the Dominion's council chambers, feigned distress to lure a Terran vessel, hijack it, and extract the secrets behind Earth's new hyperdrive technology. Tathari warlords chuckled at the notion that gullible humans would happily rush to rescue a hidden trap. What the Tathari could not anticipate was that the humans had quietly prepared themselves, morally and perhaps unexpectedly. While emphasizing peace, Earth had not neglected its security concerns. A new generation of Starship AI was programmed to detect false distress signals by analyzing subtle electromagnetic footprints. Moreover, the humans also believed that compassion required shrewdness, not blind trust. Thus, when a Tuthare scout ship broadcast a distress call describing mechanical failures, the Terran vessel Esperanza responded, but did so with heightened alert. The young commanding officer, Admiral Florencia Khan, hailed the scout, offering help, but carefully monitoring every possible approach. The Tuthari, sure of their trap's success, revealed their warships too soon. Multiple destroyers emerged from behind an asteroid belt, weapons primed. The Terrans refused to flee, though. Instead, Admiral Khan opened channels to parley, broadcasting that they held no ill will. This stunned the Tathari on board the Dominion's ships. They had expected fear or immediate battle, not a calm conversation. When the Tathari demanded the Terran surrender, Admiral Khan explained that humans had enough defenses to hold their ground, yet they preferred dialogue over destruction. A moment of tense standoff ensued. The Tathari, sensing no immediate advantage, withdrew while hurling insults. Still, they harbored a growing curiosity about how to handle such an unorthodox enemy. If the humans' vow of compassion was genuine, maybe there was an angle the Dominion could exploit. But the event also planted a seed of doubt, as though brutality alone would not guarantee victory against a species so devoted to cooperation. Beyond these tensions, humanity continued forging new relationships. One notable ally emerged, the Githari, a species of gentle arthropods that soared along cosmic storms to gather interstellar materials. Their physiology included elongated limbs, with digits that could manipulate objects in graceful, minute detail. Historically, the Githari had shied away from alliances, preferring isolation to avoid exploitation. But when a Githari diplomat named Rylix discovered the story of Avex Lor's rescue and experienced human generosity firsthand, the Githari recognized a kindred spirit. They visited Earth, marveling at how humans protected the environment of their home planet, dedicated entire institutions to justice and charity, and built societies around a concept of moral progress. Negotiations with the Githari were less about trade pacts and more about mutual wonder and respect. The Githari taught humans advanced harmonics to stabilize warp fields. In return, Earth's engineers devised specialized simulators to help the Githari adapt to harsh planetary conditions they had never dared explore. Their synergy was not merely mechanical, but philosophical. The bond between species who valued life above convenience. Within a few quick years, a small but determined coalition of like-minded civilizations began to form around Earth's example. They were not necessarily pacifistic. Each species understood the necessity of self-preservation in a galaxy riddled with predatory forces. However, they agreed that ethical treatment of sapient beings should be paramount. The coalition established crisis response teams, traveling across sectors to intervene in humanitarian disasters, famine, or plague. Their cooperative efforts drew curious praise, but also the scorn of older alliances that believed only in power. The largest threat to this budding movement came from an empire known simply as the Charon Imperium, a regime with a history of ruthlessness outdone only by its thirst for expansion. The Imperium thrived on the exploitation of weaker worlds, extracting energies, subjugating populations, and enslaving entire systems. When the Imperium recognized the emergence of this compassion bloc, it swiftly set to work undermining them, bribing local governors to sabotage supply lines, spreading propaganda that Earth and its allies were harboring secret weapons. Attempting to frame the alliance, the Imperium's intelligence agencies orchestrated false flag attacks on neutral convoys. As tension ratcheted up, the threat of open warfare loomed. Human leaders, undeterred, believed that to respond with equal aggression would betray their core value. Instead, Earth sought every legal channel, forging diplomatic ties, exposing sabotage through transparent investigations, and appealing to the galactic councils that still upheld common legal frameworks. In a stirring address broadcast across the major hyperspace relays, Earth's President Asha Delgado declared that peaceful coexistence did not mean accepting subjugation. She also stated that humility and compassion must not be confused with weakness. The speech sparked outrage in the Imperium, who saw it as an affront to their sovereign right of conquest. The Imperium's Grand Marshal, Kaukal Reith, declared humans and their allies to be saboteurs of the cosmic order. They threatened the natural hierarchy, defying millennia of tradition. Their feigned kindness is a disguise for their ambition, roared Reith in a widely distributed address. War seemed inevitable. Tragedy struck a short time later in the Illic system, home to a peaceful amphibious race known as the Telnar. They had joined Earth's coalition primarily to protect their precarious oceanic environment. The Imperium launched an overwhelming assault, bombarding Telnar cities, decimating the ocean floors and capturing thousands. There was a collective outcry from the Allies, and any illusions that the Imperium might be negotiated with vanished. Interstellar convoys from Earth and its alliance rushed to the Telnar's aid. Fleet Admiral Dominic Richards, commanding the Terran Battle Group, brought with him a task force that combined the Cathari's warp harmonics with newly minted shield technology derived from Zilari and other races. They pierced the thick blockade thrown up by Imperium warships orbiting Telnar's largest moon. Richards demanded safe passage. To evacuate civilians, the Imperium's battleships opened fire. What followed was the largest space engagement the galaxy had witnessed in centuries. Warships from the Coalition faced off against the Imperium's dreadnoughts. Earth's advanced shield systems, supplemented by the Cathari's meticulously tuned resonance fields, blocked waves of lethal energy. Meanwhile, Coalition humanitarian frigates darted down to the Telnar oceans. During the conflict, the Tutari Dominion unexpectedly arrived. Their motives were uncertain. Many believed them to be an ally of the Imperium, but they stayed on the periphery, scanning the battle. Instead of joining the Imperium's side, the Tutari launched a communications probe, broadcasting a direct question: why do you risk your fleets for an amphibian species that offers little strategic value? Admiral Richards answered simply, because life is precious. We cannot abandon the defenseless. The Tutari considered this as the fight raged on. Something in these words, some reflection of their earlier standoff, stirred them. Though the Dominion's ideology was harsh, they recalled the humans' calm restraint in the face of hostility. After intense deliberation within their chain of command, the Tutari decided not to intervene against the Coalition. They withheld their guns, and in a quiet but profound gesture, they opened a safe corridor for refugees, guaranteeing no Tutari interference. This single act saved thousands of Telnar from captivity. The Imperium's blockade around Telnar was formidable, yet the Coalition resisted ferociously. Over an entire Terran month, wave after wave of Imperium reinforcements arrived, battered the Allies' lines, and retreated. The Allied forces stood their ground with strategic cunning, always ensuring minimal loss of life, even among enemy ranks. With each passing engagement, Imperium soldiers were stunned by the humane rules of engagement. Damaged Imperium lifeboats were recovered with the same urgency as Allied craft. Field medics tried to stabilize injured Imperium Marines. These acts, while small in the expanse of cosmic war, rippled across the Imperium's ranks. Rumors spread of Terrans who placed captured Imperium soldiers in comfortable detention centers, offering them dignified treatment in line with advanced interstellar legal codes. Because of this, desertion and surrender among Imperium troops gradually increased. Some of those captured recognized that if the roles were reversed, they would have been enslaved or executed. This stark revelation, ignited a silent crisis of conscience within the Imperium's armies. Eventually, the Imperium's leadership faced a debacle. The campaign in Telnar was stalemated by an alliance that refused to yield and refused to cruelly exterminate their enemy. Reluctantly, the Imperium agreed to parley, an event once unthinkable. Representatives from Earth, the Getheri, the Zalari, and Telnar survivors convened, with Imperium envoys in a partially destroyed Telnar city, once splendid coral towers, battered by war. President Delgado herself attended, alongside Imperium Commander Sarven, a hardliner once rumored to have orchestrated entire planetary purges. Despite mutual suspicion, the negotiations found an unlikely anchor in the Imperium's recognition that the humans' unwavering compassion had reduced morale among Imperium troops. Reports indicated that many Imperium soldiers, disillusioned by their government's brutality, were more than willing to lay down arms if promised fair and respectful treatment. This forced Commander Sarven to consider alternatives. His empire, built on fear, discovered fear was no longer enough in the face of genuine empathy. It did not result in immediate galactic peace. The Imperium would not relinquish its domain easily, and the Tuthari remained watchful and mysterious. Yet an armistice was signed, guaranteeing Telnar's sovereignty and establishing a demilitarized zone along key hyperlanes. The ephemeral hush fell across 100 star systems. For the Imperium, it was the first time in centuries they had retreated from a campaign. Their intelligence agencies scrambled to understand how compassion had undone their might. Meanwhile, on Earth and allied worlds, celebrations were subdued out of respect for the suffering endured by the Telnar. Humans had long recognized that victory was hollow if purchased by needless carnage. So instead of triumphant parades, Earth dispatched thousands of aid ships to help rebuild Telnar's underwater cities, restore marine life, and assist the wounded and displaced. This monumental post-war reconstruction effort was spearheaded not only by humans, but by Gethari engineers, Zalari merchants, Telnar scientists, and defectors from the Imperium who sought redemption. The galaxy beheld an unprecedented scene. Different species laboring side by side, not for conquest, but for life and home. As the reconstruction progressed, more species took note. Some had remained on the fence, wary of involving themselves in a confrontation pitting the Imperium's might against Earth's new coalition. Among these observers were the Zartan, a xenophobic race that had historically sealed themselves behind molecular shields and rarely ventured out, and they were known for intellectual brilliance, but had no allies to speak of. Distressed by the potential threat of an Imperium invasion, the Zartan carefully studied Terran's approach to conflict resolution. From clandestine vantage points, they saw that humans held firm to their values. Even as Telnar's rebuilding had begun, Earth's coalition officials were investigating alleged war crimes on all sides, aiming for truth and accountability. The Zardan found the concept of willingly subjecting oneself to moral scrutiny extraordinary. They had believed all species sought to hide their misdeeds beneath lofty words. Yet, these humans, it seemed, insisted that justice applied to everyone. Slowly, the Zardan began sending observer delegations to Earth. What they saw astonished them. A civilization that used advanced technology not solely for military or economic power, but for humanitarian ends. They toured hospitals floating in low orbit around Earth's colonies, facilities dedicated to curing diseases across different biologies. They were introduced to Terran libraries brimming with centuries of literature, philosophy, and art that championed empathy and cooperation. The Zartan had never encountered a culture so eager to share knowledge without binding treaties. Impressed, they began to question everything they believed about isolation and the fundamental nature of other species. In the months that followed, the Zartan quietly opened dialogue with Earth, exploring a mutual pact of knowledge exchange. Out of caution, they did not fully accept membership in the coalition, but it was a start. They recognized that forging alliances might not always be a trap. Sometimes it could engender growth that benefited all. Peace, however, was fragile. The Charon Imperium, humiliated at Telnar, seethed with resentment. Under the guidance of Grand Marshal Reth, expansive rearmament was underway. The Imperium hoped to integrate new technology gleaned from black markets, eventually unleashing a renewed offensive. Meanwhile, the Tuthari Dominion, though they had refrained from attacking the Terrans, remained enigmatically perched on the fence. Their system-wide intelligence webs gathered data on both the Imperium's ambitions and Earth's punishing moral code. Deep in the Dominion's archives lay the long-buried memory of a time when empathy had thrived among them, but centuries of militaristic expansionism had overshadowed it. The Tuthari warlords, threatened by the Imperium's global appetite, began to weigh whether they should continue wandering in self-serving isolation or consider forging a formal alliance with these improbable do-gooders. In an unexpected turn, Avex Lor, the Zalari merchant once saved by the humans, emerged as a roving peace envoy. By capitalizing on his extensive merchant networks, he journeyed to the far corners of the galaxy, weaving accounts of personal transformation and Earth's unwavering assistance into the fabric of every port's rumor mill. He negotiated small treaties, hammered out trade agreements, and built cultural bridges. On more than one occasion, Avex found himself in precarious negotiations with those who doubted Terran intentions. He recounted his own experience of near-death rescue and the subsequent awe at being treated, not as a potential asset, but a life worth preserving for its own sake. This grassroots public relations campaign achieved what official ambassadors sometimes struggled with. It humanized the human. Instead of faceless planetary bureaucrats, real stories of rescue and trust took root in foreign hearts. Little by little, star systems that had been hardened by centuries of realpolitik began to question whether Earth's approach was, indeed, a radical shift in galactic affairs. As negotiations continued, humanity's coalition blossomed steadily into a legitimate power. Their fleets remained modest in comparison to the Imperium's mighty dreadnoughts, but they boasted the unwavering loyalty of diverse species who had been touched by the Terrans' kindness. What the Alliance lacked in sheer number of warships, it made up for in unified resolve, advanced medical support, skilled diplomats, and a moral principle that bound them together. The chain of alliances spread like cosmic starlight across dark pockets of the galaxy. Githari research teams collaborated with Telnar oceanographers to rejuvenate other species' dying aquatic environments. Exartan scientists collaborated with Earth's biomolecular experts, discovering cures that once seemed unattainable. Even in the Tuthari Dominion, smaller factions lobbied for improved relations with the Terran-led alliance, hoping to ensure future security from Imperium aggression. Eventually, a second crisis erupted, launched this time by rogue warlords who had defected from the Imperium and believed they could expand by force while the Imperium reeled from its armistice. Leading a coalition of mercenaries, these warlords targeted neutral worlds reliant on trade routes. They attacked convoys, enslaved crews, and attempted to blockade entire star lanes. Once again, eyes turned to the humans and their allies for help. Had Earth's moral code become a beacon for all who felt threatened? In response, the coalition rallied with a swift multi-species task force to push back the warlords. This call to arms was joined by smaller nations from across the galaxy who had begun to see Earth's coalition as a stable peacekeeper. Together, they coordinated a strategic campaign to liberate enslaved populations without inflicting unnecessary casualties. The warlords were outmatched by the Alliance's combined might, forced into sporadic retreats, and once again, captured enemy soldiers found themselves in humane custody, offered fair trials, and in some cases, opportunities for rehabilitation. Though some in the galaxy still called this approach sentimental weakness, many more saw it as a clarion call that genuine justice was possible. In the aftermath of that conflict, the Chiron Imperium found itself in a precarious position. If Earth's coalition kept expanding, entire star clusters could unite against Imperium tyranny. Were it not for the unstoppable tide of moral influence, the Imperium might have unleashed an all-out crusade to reassert its dominance. But they faced mounting unrest at home. Among their own populace, especially the younger generations who had glimpsed the coalition's alternative model, discontent with the Imperium's oppression took hold. A quiet but growing rebellion simmered on the Imperium's fringe colonies, emboldened by knowledge that they might find asylum among the Terrans if they escaped. The Imperium had once believed fear was enough to keep order, but Earth's demonstration of compassion threatened that strategy profoundly. The time then arrived for a pivotal moment, the founding of what would be known across the galaxy as the Allied Council of Sentient Life. This was not just a treaty, but a binding charter of rights recognizing that sapient life, regardless of origin, had certain inalienable rights. At a summit on the neutral world of Ethoria, representatives from dozens of species gathered, including a small delegation from the Tuthari Dominion. They debated guidelines on the humane treatment of prisoners, the prohibition of planet-busting weapons, and the creation of an interstellar tribunal that would adjudicate crimes against sentient beings. The days of argument were long, with the Tuthari delegates balking at any notion of restricting their military autonomy. Yet the coalition's steady logic and the moral authority it had earned prevailed. In an unexpected twist, the Tuthari themselves introduced an amendment ensuring the principle of honorable conflict, which mandated attempts at peaceful resolution before any sanctioned military action. While not every figure in the Tuthari ranks supported it, the measure was passed. Press outlets across the galaxy heralded the Allied Council's founding as an evolutionary shift in interspecies relations. Thanks to humanity's relentless advocacy, entire star systems now had a legal framework that codified compassion. One might assume that such progress came at minimal cost, but the truth was more complicated. Etelnor had lost entire generations in the Imperium's assault. Scars of trauma lingered among survivors. The Githari faced environmental disruptions from resource demands as they strove to help many struggling worlds. Earth itself grappled with the strain of leading a galaxy-wide moral mission, when some on Earth questioned the toll. Yet the Coalition's growing alliances offered unprecedented opportunities. Trade thrived like never before, not just for material items, but for scientific ideas, cultural practices, and mutual learning. Younger humans grew up in a universe where they saw themselves not as dominant, but as responsible neighbors. They were taught to see compassion not just as a virtue, but as a strategic, unifying force that could inspire entire civilizations to seek alternatives to war. Of course, the Imperium was still looming, still formidable, and not all Tuthari warlords embraced the new order. Tensions, skirmishes, and political dramas did not vanish. The galaxy was far too vast and diverse for utopias. Yet, the seeds of something greater had taken root. Humans continued to champion the idea that one need not choose between strength and empathy. They could reinforce each other. Even the ex-Zartan, known for centuries of aloofness, began sending scientists and philosophers to gather on allied worlds for joint research, forging deeper partnerships. They reported home stories of interspecies cooperation, fueling a slow but perceptible change in how the Zartan viewed external contact. In scattered corners of the galaxy, entire star systems that once lived in fear of conquest found hope in forging alliances with Earth's diplomatic envoys replaced the battleships that had once threatened them. Culture, trade, and curiosity flourished where dread had once held sway. With time, stories of these transformations began to crystallize into legends. Children on 100 worlds grew up hearing tales of the Terrans who defied the odds through resolute empathy in the face of ancient empires. They imagined heroes walking alien streets without fear, armed only with sincerity, accompanied by arthropod allies from Githari or luminescent amphibians from Telnar. Interstellar merchants whispered about the miracles of Terran medical interventions that saved entire populations from exotic epidemics. Soldiers in the Imperium's ranks questioned the old narratives describing humans as gullible weaklings. Indeed, the notion of kindness as strength began to spread as a concept, deserving respect, not mockery. And so years morphed into decades. Although the galaxy was never entirely cured of discord, the moral architecture forged in these times shifted the balance of power. Empires like the Imperium found themselves increasingly constrained by interstellar condemnation. When they ventured too far into cruelty, the Tuthari Dominion, recognizing that a world guided by a collective sense of ethics offered stability they might benefit from, moderated some of their expansionist policies. More and more conflict resolutions were handled through diplomatic channels rather than open warfare. The Allied Council of Sentient Life, though often racked by bureaucratic tangles, served as a forum for dialogue, forging and reforging alliances. Crucially, Earth's coalition remained steadfast in its core principles, acknowledging that compassion was never a static ideal, but an ever-evolving practice, demanding constant vigilance and renewal. One remarkable final scene unfolded on a small moon called Sorellis, once a slave outpost for the Imperium. Freed by the coalition, Sorellis had blossomed into a multiracial commune. On its wide landing platforms, a Tuthari ambassador arrived, escorted by both Githari and Terran representatives. The Tuthari had asked for a meeting to discuss future borders, and possibly a permanent peace treaty with Earth's allies. As the Tuthari envoy disembarked, they were greeted not by trembling vassals, but by citizens of Sorellis, some Telnar, some Zalari, a number of humans, and even a few Imperium defectors. Sicarian banners that simply read, Peace. The ambassador, whose forebears had once scorned empathy as a weakness, stood quietly under Sorellis' turquoise sky, seeing how these once separated peoples worked together in everyday harmony. The alien turned to the human representative, a man named Kieran Delgado, grandson of President Delgado, and spoke in a subdued voice. "We have come to learn more about this unity you share." Kieran placed a hand on his chest, bowed slightly, and with a smile replied, "We welcome you. Let us learn together." Thus, a future once shaped by fear coalesced into something far brighter, not perfect or free of conflict, but unquestionably transformed. Star systems that had suffered under iron fists for eons began to glimpse a different path, and everywhere, from Telnar's coral reefs to the Githari's cosmic harnesses of warp storms, from the wounded edges of Imperium space to the labyrinthine Zartan laboratories, people remembered how it all began. Through the unwavering conviction that every life was worth saving, that dignity was not reserved for the powerful, and that compassion was far more than an abstract principle, it was the bedrock of a new galactic era. In that shared recognition, bound by treaties and deeper moral ties, humanity found itself embraced. They had proven that strength of arms could deter aggression, but it was the strength of heart that truly bound empires and individuals alike in the cosmic tapestry. And so the galaxy turned to a new chapter, hopeful and uncertain, yet guided, at its core, by an enduring truth that treating all life with respect and empathy could reshape the destiny of countless worlds.